Okay, great. Nice to see you all here. Sorry for the late start, but we're expecting more people, so we'll let them arrive at LA time. And thank you all for being here and being on time. It's very exciting for us to be able to talk about yoga and Judaism tonight. So I'm Ida, I'm the coordinator of the event, and I'm also on the panel. It's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Rabbi Anne Brener, who's sitting at the other end of the table. She works for the Skirball Hospice. She is spiritual director for the Rabbinical School, AJR. She is in private practice as a psychotherapist and a spiritual guidance person. What's the right word? Spiritual director, thank you. And she is my friend and my yoga student as well. So I've had the pleasure of knowing her, gosh, for over 20 years now. And we worship and play in the same community quite often. So I give you Rabbi Anne Brener.
Thank you, Ida. So I'm sure that if not for yoga, I wouldn't be here, and I certainly wouldn't be wearing a kippah. So I want to tell you that story, and then we will hear from others about the connection of Judaism and yoga in their lives. Many years ago, about 40 years ago, I had multiple losses in my life, and I was drawn to yoga as a way of healing. I kind of ran from anything Jewish at the time. It really didn't seem to have what I needed to help me find healing at that time. And I began doing a lot of yoga, and then one day, I can tell you where I was. I was on the 6th floor of the Berkeley Student Center in the Tilden Chapel doing yoga, and I was in the bridge pose, and I came down, and all of a sudden, I knew what the Shema was about. For the first time in my life, I had said the prayer as a child over and over every night, and I never understood it. But I came down from that pose, and I had a sense that veils were being pulled that separated the worlds, and that, first of all, I felt that I hadn't really lost my mother and sister. I felt a real connection with them. And then I had this sense of oneness. I began weeping uncontrollably. And then I was really blessed because very, very shortly thereafter, I ran into Reb Zalman Schachter, Shalom, he was Zalman Schachter at the time, in a lecture, and he validated, yes, this is what the Shema is about, that sense of oneness that I experienced when I did yoga. And so from that moment on, I felt that my yoga practice and my Jewish practice were one. And you may not know this, but in your class, I'm generally chanting the Shema while I'm in the different poses. So we want to find out how yoga and Judaism fit together. I know that I'm clearly not the only person who's had this experience. And I think it's a very important experience as we move into a time of really welcoming the esoteric Judaism. Most of us are around similar ages, or a certain bracket of ages, and we came into a world that was really about exoteric Judaism. Now we're moving into a different era. Thank God we've had the safety to do that. And so let's hear how it works. Why don't we start Avivah Erlick, who is an ordinee of the Academy for Jewish Religion in California, where I teach. She's the creator of Gentle Jewish Yoga, which is a combination of mystical Jewish teachings and adaptive and chair yoga, which she teaches to people of all ages and abilities. And she also is a community rabbi and healthcare chaplain. She has a chaplaincy referral service.
My story is similar. Yoga led me to become a rabbi. I was a newspaper editor for 20 years, and I had two hobbies. I like to chant Torah, which is something I learned to do at my synagogue, and I like to take yoga classes at the gym. And so I was sort of casting around with the idea after 20 years in this career of journalism that maybe I would like to consider another occupation. And so I was sort of opening my mind in that way and taking more yoga classes. And I actually took a meditation class. And I found that something was happening in my yoga class. So I went to my rabbi and I said, I've been coming to services, you know, for 20 years. I was conservative. I'd go to services every Shabbat, you know, do all the holidays. But I'm going to yoga and something's happening that feels like religion. Is it converting me to Hinduism? I was sincerely frightened. And my rabbi, bless his heart, said to me, actually, God has been trying to reach you through all that Jewish prayer all these years, and now is succeeding through your yoga. I had lived in Israel. I knew what the Hebrew meant, but I had never bothered to integrate that knowledge with the prayers I was saying. I was still saying empty syllables like I'd done all my life. And then, wow, this is beautiful poetry, and I understand it, and I feel it, and all I wanted to do was that. I just wanted to pray and learn about Jewish teachings, and I read voraciously, and within a few months I was applying at all the rabbinic schools of town, and found that AJR, Academy for Jewish Religion, had this spiritual bent that I was looking for. While I was in rabbinical school, I got myself certified as a restorative yoga teacher. I chose restorative because I wanted to be able to teach people sitting in the pews in synagogue in street clothes. Because for me, yoga is a mental process. It's not an exercise, although, you know, God bless these beautiful teachers.
People here were kind of asking me, how do you grapple being the rabbi's wife and leading a community in that way and going to these classes? But I didn't understand what they were talking about. I truly didn't understand what the conflict is. What's that dialogue about? So I was sitting on the retreat, watching my teacher, and I say this with great respect for the practice of pouring another gallon of milk on his little deities. Gallon after gallon after gallon, in order to wash and present the cleanliness it was like a Saturday afternoon. Puja, it's called, which is the practice of this. And I was like, it's Havdalah time. You know, it is, the light outside was calling me, and I looked at my clock, and it was like, I have to go outside. I have to remove myself from this. It was the first time I felt, oh, this is awkward, this isn't mine. And she said, oh, I'm Jewish too. You want to do Havdalah? I'm not kidding, it was the craziest thing. So we fabricated, you know, the 3 symbols, and we did a lovely Havdalah service outside. We came back in, and, you know, it didn't matter. It wasn't cathartic either way for anybody else, but that next month that we finished the practice on Sunday, I came home Monday and I picked up the Siddur.
I decided to, instead of having my surgery, I decided to use yoga as my healing. I got an opinion of a doctor saying if you do physical therapy and yoga, so long as you don't run Ironman triathlons, you can do pretty good in life. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. And I noticed that when I started doing the yoga, I was rehabbing my knee, I was rehabbing my heart, I was rehabbing my head. I was sort of just getting back into a good groove of mindfulness. And then the big observation came with my Judaism practice. Side note, and this is also semi-home turf for me, because I play clarinet in a service here called Shabbat Unplugged with the lovely Michelle's husband, Rabbi Jonathan Aaron. So all the while, these beautiful melodies were really inside me, internalized. And once I added yoga to the mix, I noticed that my prayer was deepening, my playing was deepening, my ability to sort of just be in the present was coming to the forefront of just my everyday practice, my being. And that was really, really impactful to me. And then one day before the service, a friend of mine who also played in the service, this guy named Amir, who played the djembe, who was also into yoga, we were stretching, breathing, and getting ready for to do our formal prayer, and he turned to me and he said something very profound. He said, "Man, do I wish we could do something like this, a musical Jewish-based yoga Shabbat." I was like, well, why can't we? You know, let's do that. So that led me to create this thing, Om Shalom Yoga, which is a musical Jewish movement-based Shabbat. And it's just, it's a constant journey, and I've been able to, be lucky enough to just explore these gifts, and with the knowledge that, thank God, there is this community of people that are interested in it, much like all of you. So yeah, it's a very safe and beautiful time to be part of this community, and that's basically the story.
So now I have the delight of introducing my teacher, Ida Unger. Ida has taught yoga locally and nationally for more than 20 years. Ida and I are actually part of the Aleph Jewish Renewal Community. And I knew that this community was right for me when I went to a service, and the person who was leading the service said, I'm the rabbi, I'll be leading the service. My husband, the Hazan, will be leading the music. Who will lead the movement? And I said, this is it. So this is the Jewish Renewal Community. Ida is certified in the Iyengar method and is known for it, which is known for its emphasis on alignment, resulting in improved health. And she also continues to study yoga and therapeutic applications of yoga. In the early 90s, her roots, Judaism, began to merge with her wings, as she says, yoga, resulting in the deepening of both. She's the creator of Sacred Shapes, the Alphabet Yoga poster, which you can see and maybe even buy it here tonight. She lives in Tahunga with her husband and son and dogs, and uses yoga as prayer, exercise, reflection, and a path to health. Ida combines the precision of Iyengar yoga with a flow of compassion and caring that just emphasizes the spirituality at the heart of both yoga, but I really feel it's her neshama, her Jewish neshama, that's really guiding us there. So she raises a question which I think is really the core of what we're all here wondering about tonight. She says, Jews are receiving yoga in this generation. Wow. It is our time for inner quietude, reflection, and peace. I think that's a really important statement. Why now? And what is yoga bringing to us that we've been missing that I think really heals not just our bodies, but really is healing our tradition? So, my dear teacher, continue.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you all for being here tonight. Is this on? Can you hear me? Great. Well, in the 90s is when I started having Jewish revelations in yoga, and it wasn't that comfortable for me because prior to that I had really separated my yoga world and my Jewish world. So yoga was exercise, and Judaism was life cycle events, spirituality, prayer, pretty much everything else. But in the 90s, when I started having these experiences, many Jews were asking rabbis, what about yoga? Can we do yoga? Is yoga kosher? And from just about every branch of Judaism, the answer came, just do the physical part. That's okay, do the physical part. Then it's not idol worship. And that's how I approached it too. I came, prior to my epiphanies, I came from an Orthodox Jewish background, a yeshiva education, and it was very much drummed into us that anything from a foreign culture was potentially idol worship, avodah zarah. We just don't do it. So when I found yoga, it was a health club environment. I had 2 teachers, Chad Hamrin, who's still around in LA. I don't know if any of you know Chad. And he's pretty Iyengar based, although he's not certified. And Mari Gayatri, who's no longer in this town, I believe she's in Oregon. But she was a very spiritually based yoga teacher. And I would see one or the other of them each and every day. And the experiences were very different. Chad was very scientific, explained with a lot of detail about what to do. And Mari was very spiritual, and she wore these beautiful flowing robes. And she would just delight in spirituality, and she would sing to us. And it was really a beautiful class, but I kind of separated myself from the spirituality of it. And I would also kind of go to the Shema. When there was a lot of Hindu prayer going on in the room, I would go to the Shema. So one way yoga's made me a better Jew is I do find myself saying the Shema quite often in yoga classes. But what happened for me after 15 or so years of practice, I guess my body was finally open enough to not feel the blocks, right? When you first start yoga, how many people in the room do yoga? Okay, I won't ask the others to raise their hand. Okay. So when you first start yoga, it's a lot about stretching and finding where your body won't go and breathing there and seeing if there can be a change. So you greet the hardened places in your body, the tougher places in your body. And it's only after years of practice that there's really a sense of openness and euphoria, pose after pose after pose. But I guess those who love yoga, as soon as you feel those blocks and you're able to breathe into them and feel some sense of growth and movement, then you're hooked. Anyway, the Hasidim call these hardened places klipot, hardened shells. So they're acknowledged in the Jewish tradition as well. Anyway, when I was, after 15 years of yoga, I was in a yoga pose, and the energy was moving through my body in a way that it hadn't before, and I realized that I was in the shape of the olive. And this really scared me. I thought maybe this is the beginning of some kind of idol worship, some kind of connection happening within me that shouldn't be happening. And within a week or so, I had several more letters. So it continued to happen. And you know, it's such a small world. I didn't really have a connection with Malibu, but I had a yoga teacher then, and he said, talk to Rabbi Judith Halevi, because she was a yoga student and also a rabbi. She's the rabbi in Malibu. The world gets smaller. Anyway, she suggested that I talk to John. I arrived at the Institute again, and this time I was walked down to the library, and he was sitting there, and he had a pile of letters in front of him, and my letter was on top, and my donation was still there in cash. And I started to ask, he said, I hear you have a question for me, and I started to ask my question, and he screamed and pounded the table, and he said, why are you asking me this? Why are you asking me questions I know nothing about? And I said, well, sir, you know an awful lot about yoga, and I could tell you a little about Judaism. Why are you asking? He just interrupted me and asked the same question again. And he said, thank you for coming. And then the secretary said, your meeting is over. And this was the shortest meeting I had ever had. It was less than 2 minutes. Sure. And I was glad it was over, believe me. I walked up those stairs very happily. And as I was leaving, the secretary came and said, can you please tell me what you were going to tell him? So I showed him. What I had done is Light on Yoga. I see a copy of it here. This is the seminal book. This is like the Bible of Iyengar Yoga. It's got the 650 poses. Each one explained how to do it and what the effects are. I had cut up my old copy. You know, I'm on my maybe 6th copy of this book because we use it so often it falls apart. So I had cut up my old copy and put an olive on a page and put his picture with the olive. So that was my first view of how to really, who was doing the poses sharp enough to really show the olive bed. It was BKS Iyengar. So I showed the secretary my 26 pages, or 22 at that time, I just used the basic letters, of the olive bed, and he said thank you. And then I went shopping, because that's what I do when I'm frustrated and stressed. And at 6 p.m. that night, I had my regular yoga class. So I was there every morning practicing, and every evening I had my class. So I arrived at the Institute, and I was laden down with all my shopping. And when I walked into the yoga room, there was BKS, Iyengar, on the floor in a yoga pose, and his eyes beamed me over to him. It was so clear and wordless that I was to go over there, and I really regretted the shopping at that point because it was so awkward. I had all these packages. He was literally in a pose lying on the Suptavirasana, for those of you who know, with no props. So he was literally plastered against the floor, and I had to bend down, and I do have his exact words here, so let me read that. Never call it Jewish yoga, as every Jew and every yogi will think you made it up. Yoga is yoga, and Jewish is Jewish. What if I called it Hindu yoga? Would you have come? Didn't I go to Israel and teach also? Yoga is not for one group, it is for all. And if we try to grab it, we make it smaller than it is. Yoga is about broadening. And if it's not used for broadening, it is a distortion of yoga. Don't make a large subject small. He continued, don't be a fundamentalist. No one likes a fundamentalist.
If only that were true.
But he went on to say, it's good to do Jewish prayers, have your own analogies, have your own symbols. So yoga is not like putting on a coat from the outside. Rather, it is a deep excavation of what is already there. So this was profound advice for me, because I was, in thinking about teaching yoga to Jews, I was making both subjects smaller, frankly. So once I came back from India, I did not teach Jewish yoga for a while, and I really sat with this advice. Well, how do you not make it smaller, but you're allowed to use Jewish prayers and Jewish analogies, etc.? And it was really, you know, like most yogic truths, there's something within that contradiction that is closer to truth than either side of it. Does that make sense? So finally, it was within myself that I had to figure out the essence of yoga and the essence of Judaism and where they connect. And now I feel when I teach yoga to Jews, it's not a distortion because it's broadening. So I feel like I've gotten there. I did send BKS Iyengar a copy of my yoga poster, and he wrote me a letter saying he approves because it looks like I've learned the poses from him. So that was a big compliment.
So thank you all. I guess the questions that I'd like to just give you a chance to explore a little bit more is just how is your Judaism rooted in your yoga, or how is your yoga rooted in your Judaism? And how do you really defend this as, yoga means yoke. And we certainly have that word in Hebrew. It says, Ol Malchut Shamayim, the yoke between heaven and earth. And that is what we're supposed to create. And so Malchut is the lowest sphera, and is the place of earth. And we're trying so hard to bring these things together. That's what the Magan David is to me, is this sense of these two triangles coming together. Yoga seems to me a perfect way to bring the triangles together. So play with that.
Thank you. So I wanted to respond about Jewish yoga, how someone can combine them, and how it is that these thoughts that are Jewish in yoga come to our minds, being Jewish people who practice yoga. I read in Zalman Shabda Shalomi's book, Paradigm Shift. He calls this burping up Jewish stuff. It happens to seekers as they get to know their own Jewish souls. He says, once I go and sit and meditate for a while, I find that a lot of Jewish stuff starts coming through, Bubi, Zaidi, Torah, Shabbos, all kinds of stuff buried deep inside that both resistance and the normal pressures of everyday life is not allowed to come out. But if I do Zaz, it all starts, he says. People find themselves asking questions about their Judaism as they experience yoga. As I understand it, the purpose of yoga asana movement developed as sort of a training wheels, an introduction to spiritual experience. It's one of the yogas, one of the practices that were assigned to the yoga ascetics when they really needed to start from scratch and experience spirituality. So that's why it's so effective for us. It breaks you open and has you experience things deep in your heart. And if what's deep in your heart is Judaism, that's what comes to you. So as a result of that, and probably tens of thousands of Jews around the world practicing yoga, there's a lot of people who have had this combination experience, and it comes to them in different ways. It speaks to them as it forms in their hearts, and that's why Jewish yoga, that is yoga being taught by Jewish people with Jewish content, takes so many forms.
How, for people who may not have grown up in an affiliated world, may not have known Judaism so well, how can the connection be made so that they can see yoga and have yoga be a conduit back into their life as a Jew and into their really ancestral tradition?
Well, I think part of what bubbling up is, part of what happens when something bubbles up is that, you know, like we were talking about before, it's inside you. And us as Jews with our thousands of years as a community and being a people, it's just in us. Whether you went to temple, whether you went to yeshiva, whether you did Shabbat, maybe sometimes you didn't do Shabbat, we're Jewish. You know, we are one. And yoga, again, like Iyengar said, it is for everyone.
Especially because I teach out of a synagogue, people automatically assume I am teaching Jewish yoga specifically, and takes a couple of tries before I can explain that I'm not, and you don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to be a member, etc. It's just a nice couple of rooms that we get to use. But one time, a student after class said, "Oh, you do teach Jewish yoga." I said, "Oh, why is that?" And it was not a temple-going kind of gal. She probably would say she has a lot of trouble with Judaism, this woman, and she doesn't believe in God. She would probably put herself like that. She said, "You do teach Jewish yoga because you're embracing the community. At the end of class, we do chant a little bit in Sanskrit, but I ask if anybody has somebody to think about, you know, who's in need of extra loving or something, or and especially at this time period, I was doing that. And so she brought to my attention that I was asking for Misha Berach in a sense, and asking if anybody wanted to include that in their thoughts. And I thought, oh, so because I'm so connected Jewishly, so it's bubbling up in me, no matter sort of where I am, this person who maybe wouldn't have connected herself to Judaism, in that moment was getting a connection. Yeah.
Let me be a little provocative.
Yeah.
I think some of us have enough Judaism that we know that we can recognize these things. Many people do not, and yet they might call themselves Jews. Would it not be almost an obligation, or is there an obligation to say this is a Misha Berach, to try to, I mean, we have a broken lineage. That's what Jonathan Oberman and Rabbi Zalman say. We have a lineage that was broken. And because of that breakage, we had a culture, a society in trauma for quite a while. And so the inner spiritual part was just too painful to express for many people. Judaism was about going to those meetings, building those buildings, making sure that Israel was strong, all of which I thoroughly support. But for the sensitive soul, it was in exile for a long time. Yoga, Buddhist meditation, many of the things that many of us experienced outside of Judaism gave us the route back in to Judaism and to find those things in Judaism. But many people don't have that connection. And what if we were to make those connections?
I really appreciate that. I think that my answer in that moment was, yeah, you're right. Oh, how neat. And I'm very aware, though, of people being very hesitant to integrate the two, let's say. So I'm going to do it around in a little bit of more roundabout way, you know, getting your child to do some study without them realizing it. So because my student base is varied, and because I teach in various places, the bulk of them being Jewish institutions, I would hate to make somebody feel not connected right away, but then this brings them in automatically.
I would have to agree, just on the basis of now, once you realize that there is that convergence, that confluence of the two different spheres, as someone who is, I guess takes it upon himself to introduce that to people, I'm looking for correlations. And I think in terms of the yamas and niyamas, and for people that don't know, that's part of the first limb of yoga. Yoga, people think, oh, I'm doing yoga when I put my hand in the air, but really it's a discipline that has 8 different limbs, and the postures, the physical postures, is just one small portion of it. And even within that one small portion of it, we talk about triangle and upward dog and downward dog and standing our head. None of that is really, of the book, of the written description of it. The posture is just one line in the Yoga Sutras. It says the posture should be firm and comfortable. That's it. Which is interesting because Torah is so detailed. And of course there's been so much written about both, and they're both developed and whatnot. But as I go through, almost every week I read a Torah portion and I'm like, yep, that's yoga. Yeah, I see that. That's so interesting, this story, that that's so much Torah in that, and vice versa. And I don't know if that's me just superimposing my knowledge or if there's actually a connection there, but I think that, but I have to believe that there is a connection just for all the things we're talking about at the same time period. Again, this notion that we're all just being of God, some just have a special, unique relationship with it. That just, further speaks to that.
You know how when somebody wins the Nobel Peace, not the Nobel Peace Prize, but those prizes for scientific discoveries, very often it's one person in one part of the world and then someone else, like an hour or two later, a day or two later, so the prize is shared. Well, the Kabbalah teaches us that when something's available, once it comes down to earth, it's available for anyone who taps into it. So that would explain why the first person gets it, and then the people who have been also working on it get it very, very soon. And I think a similar thing happened with yoga and Judaism. When it first happened for me, I was terrified by it, and I thought, this is weird. And I grew up with yeshiva education, and I would run into my old friends from the yeshiva, and they would say, oh, we hear you're doing yoga. And the first thing they would ask is, are you bowing to Hindu statues? Are you stabbing your parents in the heart? Which they didn't say, but that was the ultimate basis of the question. But anyway, I think what happened in the early 90s, maybe as a result of the Holocaust, they say the Holocaust was the darkest time, and this earth has balance, and from darkness we go to light, and yoga is a path of light and a path of healing. And when I went to India, that same trip I talked about, meeting Iyengar, there were Jewish yoga teachers from Australia who had similar revelations. And in finding these people in LA, we had similar revelations at similar times. So there was a coming down of this information, and we each got little pieces, as Avivah was describing. There's so many teachers who picked up on little pieces because both systems are so vast. There's really so much that's possible in terms of connection. But I do believe this came down from on high because it's time for Jews to do yoga. And I want to relate that a little bit to Torah. I want to just answer Wendy's question very briefly to say there's 10 commandments and there's 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And I have worked to correlate them a little bit for my writings, and they are a little bit different and a little bit the same, and I think that, you know, that's delicious. I think that's one of the ways both systems can expand each other. But it's true, the writings on yoga are very, very concise, and the writings in Judaism, you know, we're the people of the big book, and Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a very, very small book. But I wanted to say something else now, because I'm not going to touch. Okay, I'll leave it there.
So talking about barriers, when I started taking yoga, I felt this profound discomfort around statues, pictures of gurus, and Sanskrit words. And I couldn't put my finger on why I felt that discomfort, but as I studied the halakha of it, I learned that that is exactly where I should have been feeling discomfort, because we're told many times, you know, 50 of the 613 mitzvot are to not worship idols. You know, what the top 3 10 commandments are: don't worship idols, and we're told all kinds of terrible things will happen to us if we do. So as I broke it down in my thesis, talking to rabbis all over the world who are interested in this topic, what it comes down to is there is no possibility of taint, avodah zarah, foreign worship. It doesn't carry on movement. There is nothing about a movement that can be patented by another religion. Unless it looks like something to you. So what matters is not the movement itself, but the meaning. So if I do this, am I greeting you in India, or am I praying like a Christian, or am I ending a yoga class? What does it mean to you and the people you know? If you and the people you know go, God, that's a Christian motion and I can't be seen doing that, then your heart is telling you don't do that. That's your observance of halakha.
ופרוס עלינו סוכת, סוכת שלומך, ופרוס עלינו סוכת, סוכת שלומך, ופרוס